These are the conflict islands. Conflict by name and potentially conflict by nature.
We are already under siege here.
So come on, Australia. Where the bloody hell are you?
Hello, I'm Paul Barry. Welcome to Media Watch and to Trouble in Paradise. Last Monday, a current affair alerted us to a national security threat on the conflict islands, an isolated atoll less than 1,000 kilometres from Cairns, with ACA's Steve Marshall telling viewers they're up for sale and we should all be worried.
These privately owned islands are going under the hammer.
They're vacant and they're freehold.
And anyone can buy them.
Yes, anyone, which is why millionaire owner Ian Gary Smith is offering the Australian government first dibs on all 21 of the islets and warning...
It is heaven, it is, but it's a heaven under threat.
And how so? Because, Mr Gary Smith claims, a foreign buyer could be interested.
Would you be prepared to sell these islands to the Chinese?
Yes, I have to sell the islands.
If a military-minded China moves in...
Perfect for any type of aircraft, fighter jets even.
It'll get plenty of bang for its buck. This opportunity should scare every Aussie.
According to Gary Smith, he contacted Foreign Minister Penny Wong's office in June to warn of this and to offer up the islands at the bargain price of just $25 million.
Is that a little on the low side?
I have had valuations of up to 100 million.
But he got no reply from the minister.
I haven't heard dicky-boo from them, nothing.
So he went to a current affair and suddenly his tropical paradise had its own TV sales campaign. And a chorus of voices on Sky were getting fired up at the government for ignoring the Chinese threat.
Where's the press conference today from the Foreign Minister, Penny Wong? I will just ignore these Chinese incursions once again, will we?
We've now learnt that China is eyeing off purchasing a string of islands just off Papua New Guinea, aptly named the Conflict Islands.
And by the time the Daily Mail was done with the story, the deal was all but sealed, and that foreign power was moving in. Suddenly, the little atoll no one had ever heard of was the hottest property in town, until the Prime Minister was tackled about it by Ben Fordham on 2GB and burst the bubble.
Shouldn't this be in our national security and leaning into regional stability to have a chat to this bloke about buying the islands?
Yeah, there's over 500 in that area, Ben. Over 500. Think about the implications if sellers of assets can, through the media, say, I want Australia to buy this, or else there's implications we'll sell it to China. Think about where that ends.
Where it ends would be with Australia owning an awful lot of islands. Or in this case, with a monumental backdown by Ian Gary Smith, the island's owner, on 9.
How concerned actually are you that China could establish Navy and Air Force footholds there?
I don't think that's a particularly high probability.
What? And not only that, Gary Smith then revealed the Chinese had never expressed interest in the islands, and why would they? Because they're not even on the market.
We're not involved in any discussions with the Chinese at the moment to try and sell to them. The properties are not on the market.
So, what on earth was ACA's exclusive 18-minute story about the Chinese threat all about? We contacted Mr Gary Smith to ask just that, and he confirmed the islands are indeed not on the market, telling Media Watch...
I am seeking to engage in discussions about the future of the islands before the islands are placed on the market. I only went to the media when repeated attempts over 2 months did not get acknowledged.
And what did he think of a current affairs treatment of his story, along with all those menacing Chinese rockets?
There was a serious failure in government communication. If it had been my choice, I would have concentrated more on that, rather than the somewhat less likelihood of the CCP buying it.
But, as we all know, that would have been a far less exciting story. And now, to what could be one of the media fights of the century, starring a small Australian website in the role of David and a huge multinational media corporation in the role of Goliath, but with no guarantees this time that the little guy will win.
News Corp co-chairman Lachlan Murdoch is now suing the Australian publisher of news website Crikey over an article which named his family as an unindicted co-conspirator of the deadly US Capitol riots. In documents filed in the federal court in Sydney, Murdoch's lawyers claim Crikey wrongly suggested the Fox News boss was involved in a plot with Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election result.
Crikey is a Melbourne-based news site with 11 journalists and around 25,000 subscribers. And I should declare, I once worked for it and have a very small shareholding. But its battle with the Murdochs is making headlines around the world as a fight for press freedom. So, what is it about? Well, it harks back to January 6th last year and the violent attack on the US Capitol in Washington in which 7 people died. Hundreds of Trump supporters, many carrying weapons, broke through police lines and stormed into the building in an attempt to overturn the result of the presidential election. And minutes earlier, at a nearby rally, Donald Trump had been telling them the election was stolen from them and urging,
We fight. We fight like hell. And if you don't fight like hell, you're not going to have a country anymore. So let's walk down Pennsylvania Avenue.
Fast forward to 2022, and the January 6th committee in Congress is investigating Trump's role in inciting the riot. And on 28th of June, White House staffer Cassidy Hutchinson gave evidence that Trump knew protesters were armed but did nothing to stop them, and that Trump believed Mike Pence deserved protesters' calls to hang him. Crikey's article next day, by political editor Bernard Keane, attacked Trump as an unhinged traitor who ought to be put on trial. But it ended with this sideswipe that caused all the problems.
The Murdochs and their slew of poisonous Fox News commentators are the unindicted co-conspirators of this continuing crisis.
Lachlan Murdoch was not specifically mentioned, but he is CEO of Fox Corp, and his lawyer promptly sent a concerns notice listing 14 defamatory imputations. It also demanded Crikey apologise for the hurt and offence caused and admit the comments were false, defamatory and baseless and should never have been made. Crikey quickly took the story down, calling it a gesture of goodwill, and after a flurry of legal letters, it offered to post an editorial statement admitting that Murdoch was not in cahoots with Trump, but adding he bears some responsibility for the events of Jan 6 because of the actions of Fox News. That offer was rejected, and on 15th of August, with neither side backing down, Crikey republished the story on its website, making it free to read. And a week after that, it poked the bear again by publishing an open letter to Lachlan Murdoch, which also ran as an ad in the New York Times, inviting him to sue. And within 24 hours, Lachlan did sue, filing an action in Sydney's federal court.
We put advertisements in the New York Times and the Canberra Times after nearly 2 months of back and forth with Lachlan Murdoch's lawyers saying, hey, put up or shut up, sue us or not. And now he has.
So, how has it been received? Well, Nine's papers have shown little sympathy for Crikey, saying they don't run ads for competitors. And the Herald's front page had Lachlan alongside the riot, saying,
I didn't start this.
Meanwhile, The Age was describing the stoush as a bonfire of inanities, with its chief reporter Chip Legrand telling readers,
This episode is less about lofty principles than towering egos and cold commercial interests.
But elsewhere, there was a massive anti-Murdoch reaction, with scores of people on Twitter pledging money to Crikey after an SOS from its CEO, saying if Crikey lost the case, it could be up for millions in damages and legal costs. And one of those who answered the call was vocal Murdoch critic Kevin Rudd. And another former Prime Minister who gave money was Malcolm Turnbull. Turnbull told Crikey Lachlan had made a colossal error. And on the ABC's RM Breakfast, he claimed,
January 6 could not have happened without the toxic influence of Fox News. I mean, Rupert Murdoch has done more damage to American democracy than any other individual alive today.
That opinion is often voiced in the US media. And in our view, some Fox commentators certainly did help Trump spread the big lie.
This election was a fraud. It was a rigged election.
This is disgusting, and we cannot allow America's election to be corrupted.
I can factually tell you tonight, it will be impossible to ever know the true, fair, accurate election results.
Turnbull also told the ABC he believes it's hypocritical for Murdoch to sue.
Very few people have defamed more people than the Murdochs over the years through their media organisations. They're always bleating about, freedom of speech and how the defamation laws are too harsh and, they stifle free speech.
And only this year, Lachlan Murdoch was telling the IPA that opinion should be allowed to run free.
Important issues need to be aired, examined and judged. It can be uncomfortable, but it is the media's key role in our system. In Australia, we should reject every effort, and there are many, to limit points of view, to obstruct a diversity of opinions, and to enforce a singular worldview. Those efforts are fundamentally anti-Australian.
But according to Crikey's Bernard Keane, the Murdoch's media outlets do not want free speech for everyone.
The News Corp idea of free speech is free speech for them and their allies and for the views they endorse. But should anyone use free speech to express a viewpoint News Corp disagrees with or to attack News Corp's allies, then they risk becoming the target of a torrent of vicious public attacks. At News Corp, free speech is for punching down, never for punching up. It's for speaking power to truth, not truth to power.
That's how Crikey would like people to see this fight, as a battle for freedom of speech. But if the case gets to court, it's unlikely to be what the judges focus on. So, how will the battle unfold? Well, luckily for Crikey, the law doesn't require it to prove Lachlan was a co-conspirator, and that is just as well, because it would have Buckleys. But it will argue the article did not defame Lachlan in the 14 ways he claimed, and also that his reputation was not seriously harmed. If those arguments fail, it'll have two key defences, starting with honest opinion. That would require Crikey to prove it reasonably believed what it wrote and laid out true facts on which its opinion was based. But that could be tough because the article didn't really produce any evidence. Crikey's second option could be better. It's a new public interest defence designed to protect media freedom, and it's never been tested in court. To succeed, all Crikey has to do is show the matter concerns an issue of public interest and it reasonably believed publication to be in the public interest. But while that sounds simple, most lawyers expect the court to focus on whether Crikey's behaviour was reasonable, and that could pose problems. Last month on Media Watch, we reported how journalist Steve Kinane lost a defamation case on appeal over his book Fair Game after the federal court found he did not behave reasonably because he did not seek comment from the people he was defaming. So, did Crikey seek comment from Lachlan or Fox? Murdoch says no.
Private media has never attempted to speak to Murdoch before any publication.
Now, we don't know if that failure to seek comment will be crucial, and we make no forecasts about who is going to win, except that courts generally favour plaintiffs. But the stakes are high, and it's going to be quite a fight, with the Murdoch billions and Lachlan's reputation on one side, and Crikey's millions and the principle of press freedom on the other. So, is Crikey insane to take this on? Some think it is, and suggest Lachlan will litigate them out of business. Others believe Crikey will raise millions in crowdfunding from those who hate the Murdoch media. It's already been promised more than $300,000, and it could emerge a winner even if it loses the case. And the risk for Lachlan? Well, even if he wins, the case could expose a lot of dirty laundry about any editorial role that Fox News and the Murdochs may have played in the run-up to the Capitol riot. And that could be something they would want to avoid. But whatever happens, we reckon you could sell an awful lot of tickets to this contest. And finally, to a small community paper in Queensland that's landed in hot water over its joke of the month, which began with this warning.
If you forward this to a woman, be prepared to duck and run for cover.
Meaning it's offensive to at least half the paper's readers. And when you hear the joke, you can see why.
A woman goes to the doctor with severe bruises and lacerations. What happened? Doctor, I don't know what to do. Every time my husband comes home drunk, he beats me to a pulp.
And what was the doctor's helpful advice to stop the beatings? To take a glass of sweet tea and...
Just swish and swish, but don't swallow until he goes to bed and is asleep.
And how does the joke end? With the woman returning to the doctor 2 weeks later, looking, quote, fresh and reborn.
Doctor, that was a brilliant idea. Every time my husband came home drunk, I swished with sweet tea. I swished and swished, and he didn't touch me. You see how much keeping your mouth shut helps?
Not surprisingly, several readers complained, with one contacting Media Watch to say...
It's horrific. It's not acceptable. People are in shock.
And Liz wasn't alone. A few days later, Queensland's Attorney-General and Women's Minister was tweeting...
This is not a joke. Already this month, it has been reported that several women have lost their lives due to domestic and family violence. That's just in Queensland alone.
Shannon Fentiman has now complained to the Press Council, telling the Courier Mail...
It is deeply troubling that a Queensland community newspaper would publish such disgraceful content, and it must be reprimanded for disseminating this so-called joke to its readers.
So who, you ask, is the guilty paper? It's called Murgon Moments, a free monthly publication serving the South Burnett region and the town of Murgon, population a few thousand. And its unpaid editor for 15 years is local businessman Leo Geraghty, who was awarded an Order of Australia in 2020 for his long service to the community. So, what does he have to say about the uproar over his terrible joke? Well, he didn't return our calls, but earlier this month he did offer a grumpy apology to reader Liz, saying,
I am sorry you found it offensive. Perhaps doing the copy for print at 1 o'clock in the morning, I should have been more careful to what I was including, instead of including jokes from the 2007 edition, which in those times must have been acceptable.
Well, no, it wasn't acceptable then, and it certainly isn't today. And the local business association agrees, issuing a public apology on Friday. But, to be fair to Leo, previous editions of the paper do cover community events to raise awareness of domestic violence. And when it comes to small-town papers, volunteers are often the only thing that keeps them alive. So, maybe the solution is for someone under 40 to give Leo a hand and offer to be the joke editor, because it's clear the paper needs a fresh set of eyes. That's all from us for tonight. There's more on our website, including statements from Ian Gary Smith and Crikey's editor-in-chief, Peter Fray. And don't forget Media Bites every Thursday. But for now, till next week, goodbye.